This is a Film Stories original podcast.
When you make decisions for your company, you look for the no-brainers. And if you have a lot of mailing to do, Stamps.com is the ultimate no-brainer. Mail checks, invoices, documents, and everything you need to keep your business running. Get rates up to 89% off USPS and UPS. And with the mobile app, you can take care of mailing on the go. Make the same no-brainer decisions as over 1 million other businesses with Stamps.com. Sign up at Stamps.com with code PROGRAM for a special offer. That's Stamps.com, code PROGRAM.
File opened.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Xcast. The truth is in here. I'm your host, Tony Black, and I'm delighted to say I'm again joined for the second time by Mr. Matt Lambourne.
Oh, Tony, thanks for having me on again.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah, we obviously discussed Shadows last time, and we're still involved in Season 1, and this week we're covering a maybe slightly less interesting episode. Well, that's from my perspective anyway. But this week we are covering episode 7 of season 1, Ghost in the Machine.
Let me show you something. Smart home. From this prototype, I have access to every square foot of my house. This place is as safe as Fort Knox and as energy efficient as your average igloo. We were 2 years ahead of Microsoft and Cebus when Drake, in his infinite wisdom, killed the program.
Mr. Wilczek, is this system related to the one in your corporate building?
Variation on a theme.
In your opinion, how many people know the system well enough to override it?
Finally, the bonus question. Not many is the answer.
Could someone have hacked into the system?
Well, not your average phone freak, that's for sure. But there's plenty of kooks out there. Data travelers, electro-wizards, techno-anarchists. Anything's possible.
Could you have done it?
Of course. I designed the system. That's why you guys are here, isn't it? I'm your logical suspect.
You don't seem too worried.
It's a puzzle, Miss Scully. And scruffy minds like me like puzzles. We enjoy walking down unpredictable avenues of thought, turning new corners. But as a general rule, scruffy minds don't commit murder.
Ghost in the Machine is the 7th episode of season 1 of The X-Files, and it aired on October 29th, 1993. Was written by Alex Ganzer and Howard Freeman, and is directed by Gerald Freeman. It sees, on Halloween, Mulder and Scully investigating the death of a corporate executive who may have been murdered by a thinking computer. Matt, where would you rate Ghost in the Machine? I know it's not as high as Shadows for me. What about you?
I actually really like this one. I'm quite into the whole artificial intelligence thing, particularly Gone Wrong. So this rates ever so slightly higher than Shadows for me. I'd be willing to give this a 7 version on 7.5. I found it very entertaining.
Okay.
And find that even though the technology had clearly moved on, having these supercomputers running buildings is slowly becoming quite normal now. The premise isn't outdated. If anything, it's still reasonably cutting edge in terms of artificial intelligence becoming a risk to humanity. It's actually with us as we talk right now. It's a genuine concern. So, yeah, I like this one a lot. It's not one of the absolute best episodes by any stretch of the imagination, and it slightly hinges on Monster of the Week and the X-Files mythology because of the involvement of other periphery characters, let's say. But, yeah, I really like it.
I think you make a really good point there about it being very relevant still. I think that's absolutely true. It is dated, yes, but it is relevant, and it becomes even more relevant the closer we get to something like the COS, as we find out this is called, being created later on. So I think you're absolutely right with that. I, personally, from a dramatic standpoint, think this is one of the worst of season 1 for me. I mean, I would give this about a 4, really. It just drags for me. I think from a storytelling point of view, it has some really good ideas, but it just doesn't execute them in an interesting way for me. And much like with the Jersey Devil, not quite to that level, but I found myself bored at times, and I found my attention wandering. And I think it's less about the ideas, and it's more about the execution for me.
Fair enough. I could see why it's not everyone's flavour of the month, but it works for me. Maybe on a more geeky level.
But interestingly enough, you're not on your own, because as we record in, Andrew Brooker, who's been on the show a few times, has actually tweeted to say that he's a big fan of this. He reckons it's so bad it's good.
Well, I am a big fan of so bad it's good movies, so I can totally relate to what Brooker. But I don't actually find it bad. You can pick flaws in just about everything, and certain things aren't to your taste, or the subject matter's not of your interest, and that's fine. But for me, it's always worked and still does.
That's fair enough. That's absolutely. It comes down to personal taste, I guess, doesn't it? Really, in the end of the day. So cool. Well, let's get into it. Let's start discussing this one, and obviously it begins with quite an intense conversation between the main guest character, essentially, a guy called Brad Wilczek, who's the creator of the guy who built Eurisco, which is a multinational, it seems, company, this technology company, and he's created something that the corporate guy who now runs it, a guy called Drake, wants to get rid of, doesn't he? So there's immediately an antagonism between these two.
Yeah, and this, particularly now that I'm more knowledgeable about this particular subject matter, it absolutely reeks of Steve Jobs' departure from Apple, doesn't it?
It really does. Funnily enough, Steve Jobs was exactly what I thought about Rob Labelle's performance. I think he's a bit, certainly in this scene, I think Rob Labelle is a bit over the top in terms of how he acts. I think he hasn't quite nailed the character, and I don't think he quite nails the character all the way through, but I think the character itself is a little bit prophetic, actually, because you're finding a lot of people like this, like your Mark Zuckerbergs and your Steve Jobs, these young geniuses who are coming up the ranks to, create things that are changing the world, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I quite like, maybe not the character, but let's say the physical manifestation of the character. I think they cast it quite well in that respect.
Yeah, I agree there. I think in terms of what he looks like, he's spot on. It looks like a young Larry David.
Yes, he does.
He does, doesn't he?
Now you mention it.
It really struck me at one point. The guy who plays Benjamin Drake, who's the victim ultimately in this pre-credit sequence, is a guy called Tom Butler, who went on to more memorably play a character in the season 2 two-parter Colony and Endgame, which are two of my favourite episodes of the X-Files. Yeah, and he's the he comes and he plays a CIA agent who spins them a really complicated fake tale, and he's actually an alien shapeshifter. But he's not in it for long, but he's really memorable in that, I thought. And he's a good actor, so even though he has a small role here, he makes an impact as somebody who is very corporate, much like in the last episode actually, but a bit more sinister. It's almost a shame he didn't appear for longer, because he seemed like an interesting character.
Any conspiracy theories that link this episode to that one from the real deep thinkers of the X-Files?
Yeah, let us know. Let us know. One thing I do think that the way this was executed actually was good. The way he died, I think it was nicely put together. Mark Snow's score actually through this episode is great. It's one of the best things about it, actually, because he really gets that sort of creepy synthetic undertone to the COS. When we see the camera whirring, he's got this little doom 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 thing going on, and it works really well.
Yeah, I agree. There's certain episodes where Mark Snow's capabilities really come to the fore, and he really pushes the envelope with this one. And it's one of those ones where you can say unobjectively it would be far worse without his score in it.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I do think the score is great. I think as well, when we see the COS, I don't know about you, I think the lights that you see, like kind of like the Rorschach kind of light almost, that I think it gives it a certain personality.
Yeah, I think people they need to have something tangible there to represent what's going on. If you were just looking at a server rack and then it's doing all these killings and whatever,
yeah, exactly.
It would be, you wouldn't attach yourself to it as well as having this this waveform thing going on whereby, and you can hear it talking. And does it make it more humane? Probably not, but it makes it more accessible for casual viewers, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true. I think I do wish though that obviously the way it stages Drake's death and it kills people, it kills him. I do wish that when it says file deleted, that was more of an iconic monster line in the show, because it deserves to be, really, because it has that kind of it should have been more of a catchphrase, but it didn't really turn out to be.
Yeah, it's very sinister, and whatever they've done to generate that sound effect, it's effective. Even when it's just saying mundane things, file deleted, file open, of whatever, but it's a trigger that something either has happened or is going to happen very soon.
Interestingly enough about the COS, it was obviously a major influence of this episode was 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is probably the best film ever made, or one of the best films ever made. And they're obviously HAL, the thinking computer in 2001, was a big influence on the COS. And so I sometimes thought there were moments, especially towards the end, that it reminded me of HAL.
This is where we verge on the realms of ridiculousness of my involvement in the Failed Critics podcast, but I've never seen 2001. So slap my wrist.
Well, I'd only seen it last year, in fairness, right? It was a few months ago I saw it first, so I'm not much better.
But I am aware of the character of HAL, and he's a bit of a cunty AI, let's say. I appreciate how that reflects on the COS a lot.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal. I'm sorry, Dave. I can't do that. That's the well-known line. But there is a bit of that. So you look up HAL, definitely, because there is a link, there is a connection. So obviously, we get out the credits, and we're immediately introduced to one of the major guest characters of the episode called Jerry LaManna, who is another figure from Mulder's past. It seems like there's almost like an endless line of people who used to work with in Violent Crimes that crop up, especially in the first season. There just seems to be loads of them, and he's one that obviously Mulder was partnered with. But he's not very memorable, is he? Most people wouldn't remember this guy.
He's a horrendous character in this. Why Mulder would go to any length to help this guy doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Yeah. He's very irritating. He's a user.
Yeah.
And he's just like the character whose name has slipped my mind from a couple of episodes earlier, who turns up on Scully's doorstep asking for help. He's Mulder's equivalent of that character.
Yeah.
And they're both equally spineless, worthless, and basically stealing a living off the FBI.
Yeah. I think the difference with I think the guy you're talking about is Donald Logue in Squeeze. I think his name was Tom Colton, and
that's the one, yes.
Yeah. And the difference there, I think, is that that's a better script anyway. But he's a better actor, and he manages to convincingly play a right bastard much better than this guy.
Much better hairline as well.
Oh God, this guy's hairline! What was that? What was going on?
It's a bad hairstyle when you're
terrible.
That bald.
Yeah, really. Yeah, exactly. Really bad. I thought the same. Yeah, he's not particularly likable character. Yeah, and I agree. You wouldn't think Mulder would go to any. I didn't really get much of a sense throughout this entire episode of their relationship or their dynamic. It didn't work. I think it was possibly a bit of miscasting. Really, I don't think this guy who played him, Wayne Duvall, was right for the part. They could have got a more interesting actor, and it might have. But then I don't think it's on the page. That's the thing. I don't think that really relationship is on. He's just a bit of a snake, really.
Yeah, I wonder if there was a rationale there whereby they wanted a polar opposite of Mulder. So you have Mulder, who's intelligent, charismatic, handsome, well dressed, and then you've got this guy who's scruffy, bald, ugly, twat. And it's just like, we want the absolute opposite of Mulder here, just to ram home the divide between these two.
Wouldn't you love that if that was on the casting sheet, though? We need a scruffy, ugly, bald twat. Get me one.
And they got one.
Yeah, they did. It worked. Yeah, but obviously, again, you've like with Shadows, you've got a new way of the case being delivered to Mulder and Scully's doorstep. In that you've had Drake's death, and Jerry comes to Mulder because he basically needs his help for a leg up on the ladder to get his career back in order to help him solve this crime. So it's interesting how that's the way in to the story.
When you make decisions for your company, you look for the no-brainers. And if you have a lot of mailing to do, Stamps.com is the ultimate no-brainer. Mail checks, invoices, documents, and everything you need to keep your business running. Get rates up to 89% off USPS and UPS. And with the mobile app, you can take care of mailing on the go. Make the same no-brainer decisions as over 1 million other businesses with Stamps.com. Sign up at Stamps.com with code PROGRAM for a special offer. That's Stamps.com, code PROGRAM.
Have you heard about the 2018 study that showed half of prenatal vitamins tested had unacceptable levels of heavy metals? No? Well, now you have. I'm Kat, mother of 3 and founder of Ritual, the company making traceability the new standard in the supplement industry. I remember staring at my prenatal vitamins and finding all these things I was trying to avoid. High amounts of heavy metals, synthetic colorants, and unnecessary ingredients. So, at 4 months pregnant, I quit my job and started Ritual because I believe that all women deserve to know what they're putting in their bodies and why. I'm so proud of our prenatal vitamin. The ingredients are 100% traceable, it's third-party tested for microbes and heavy metals, and recently received the Purity Award from the Clean Label Project. You see, we trace like a mother because, let's be honest, no one cares quite like a mother. But don't just take my word for it. Trace for yourself with 25% off at ritual.com/podcast.
And I think that's an interesting idea, you know, of an FBI agent who's on his downers, who needs Mulder's expertise. It's not a particularly well-drawn dynamic, really.
No, but it does give them a limitless line of connections that they can make to Mulder and Scully, because they'll both touched a lot of people's lives on the way up. Yeah. And they're both outstanding agents, so it's understandable why people would seek out their help in this respect. So when they're veering off the main mythology track on Mulder's quest, then this is perfectly reasonable state of events. To say there's nothing unusual going on here by these people stepping into their lives.
No, definitely. And I think what it also shows is just how Mulder's trajectory has gone a different way than it should have done, in that you've got, you know, he even says at one point, you know, Jerry was headed upstairs, I had a one-way ticket to the basement, you know, and he's quite happy about that, and he's quite open about that, and it's played quite a lot in these early episodes that, you know, Mulder should have been like the director of the FBI one day, really. He had the intelligence, he had the charisma, he had the education, he should have been running the place.
Yes, but he's not career-minded at all.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the difference with Jerry, in that Jerry is, but he's crap. And he's an idiot, and he just, like what he did when he lost evidence, as we later find out, that set his career back, and he's just leeching off Mulder. Which does happen a few times. You get quite a few people who end up sort of leeching off him or trying to tap into his brilliance. So obviously they go to Eurisco, and they're investigating and they're looking into it. And you've obviously got some foreshadowing of the elevator and the COS with the way it sort of throws Scully about a little bit. And that's establishment, really, isn't it? Setting up the idea that there is more to this building than first appears.
Yes, although wouldn't it be annoying if every elevator you ever got in spoke to you on every floor that it went to? Especially if you're going up a very multi-store building. That's like, this is just very poor design.
Yeah. And this is
I am demonstrating that I am an advanced operating system. I can talk to you, but I'm going to annoy you at the same time.
Yeah. And this is a huge building as well, so it'd drive you mad, wouldn't it, really?
Of course, it has no 13th floor like most buildings.
Yeah. I don't know, though, whether the COS would be capable of having the technology that the character of Claude Peterson, who's the building super, as he calls himself. Although obviously we find out there's more to him later. But he talks about that in you know, the COS is capable of all these, of basically running the place. I don't know if would that really have been capable of happening in 1993. Or do we just have to take that as the product of a brilliant mind like Wilczek?
Again, you could put this down to over-convolution, and that they needed this as a trigger to get him involved at a later point in the episode. But I didn't feel that, one, that role was necessary, or two, the person they cast was a little too jive to be in such a technical role. Like, hey, Mulder, how's it going?
Too jive. He was a little bit.
That guy's never been near a computer in his life. So having like that interview, I'm putting that down to a bit of a miscast.
That's my favourite description of a character ever. He's too jive. Brilliant. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, he doesn't quite, again, miscasting. But we then get the scene where, Jerry sells Mulder down the river and he basically steals his profile about Drake's death to the character of Nancy Spiller, who was set up in the dialogue as being this dragon of an investigator. And you only see her for like 2 minutes. And she's played, though, interestingly, by an actress called Gillian Barber, who appeared a few times in the show, memorably as the character of Penny Northern, who's one of the MUFON abductees who gets abducted with Scully. And she appears a couple of times.
That correlation.
Yeah, in the season 3 and season 4. And she's quite a minor important character in the mythology. Certainly emotionally to Scully. So she gets a bit more to do later on. But she crops up again, I think, in another role somewhere. So she's one of the Vancouver set of people that they used to just recall all the time to play different parts, which you do find the X-Files is particularly known for this, I think, in that you get so many actors who pop up all the way through the show's run, sometimes playing recurring characters as well, who then still play another random guest part.
Do you think Jerry would approach Mulder to work on his Plenty of Fish profile? Because I think he needs it, quite frankly.
He needs it. He might as well just use Mulder as the picture, reel them in, and then turn up himself.
So he's creating his own missing persons cases and turn up for dates, and he just hands them over. Okay, we're going far too far.
I think that we should remake this episode and do that story with them two.
But catfishing people from the FBI offices.
FBI catfishing, yeah. That's a story. That's a story they should write in the new series. Obviously, the difference though here is that where before Mulder has come into contact with like FBI upper echelons or other agents stealing his work, there's not the ridicule of Mulder we've seen before. That's what used to happen before, in that he was spooky Mulder. He's the element that they don't believe him, or that he's in this case Mulder's just treated like anybody else. And the emphasis is on Jerry stealing his work, which, for me, just feels less interesting and less tense, because I don't really give a shit about Jerry. I'm interested in Mulder, and it's more, they don't really do much with that, because obviously Jerry gets killed off in a minute. It just feels, like we've said, unfocused, and there was potentially a better story about these two.
Yeah, I think that is a fair comment, and no one's going to have any vested interest in the outcome of Jerry, unfortunately. In fact, if anything, they're probably rooting for him to die because of how he's behaved at this point. So how they get Mulder more invested in the investigation in general was key to actually getting anything out of this episode. And I think they do that reasonably well, how he ends up pursuing it.
Yeah. No, I think so. But this is where, obviously, now they've profiled Brad Wilczek as the potentially the guy behind this, and it makes sense. You would draw conclusions. You'd find out that he's got antipathy with Drake. There's this power play for the Eurisco building and the COS, so it makes sense that Wilczek could be the main guy in the frame, really. But obviously, we go to his house and we see he's got this exorbitant, mad millionaire's house. It's quite a cool place.
It is. It's a great building, and don't wear shoes in there, otherwise you're going to incur his wrath.
Yeah, did you notice that they made them take their shoes off?
Yes.
I didn't clock that first time round, and I just noticed that Scully had bare feet. I was like, that's they should have had a line of dialogue where he goes, put the shoes in the porch, please. Not treading your crap over my floor.
Yeah, it was all part of Wilczek's, how he carves people up into scruffy and neat people. So basically anyone who wears shoes or dresses nice or likes order is the enemy, essentially, and he likes to take challenges on as they come and respects Buddhist ideology and whatnot. He's creating divide between him and the establishment immediately, which comes more to the fore later when we learn why they might be interested in, why the government would be interested in the COS.
Yeah, and I quite like that scene, actually. I think that was quite well written. The way you've described it is excellent, I have to say, and that does sum it up. And I think it was a well-written scene in an episode where the script was iffy in places. I think that was good, and it characterises Wilczek's philosophy well. And even though I don't think he's particularly well performed, I think he's a good character, and I think he's an interesting character, and that sets that up, really. And like you said, it does tee in later into the conspiracy government angle, which comes into the story. So, yeah, it's a good point. We've again got now Scully doing a connect the dots field report, but this one, I have to say, even though I have my issue with it sometimes, this does tie into the plot a lot more, obviously, because you've got the COS hacking into a computer, and then it says file opened. So she's in trouble.
Yeah, although I think there's some technical issues here with how this scene plays out, because I think at one point later on where it tries to access a computer again, it makes the phone ring, which suggests that it's running off the same line, but yet she can make a phone call to tell someone to trace the fact that the modem's being hacked, which suggests that the modem, the computer has its own dedicated line. So there's some continuity issues there, and it's not fully explained as neatly as it should be, but there's something not quite right there.
Is this a case of the writers not quite being computer literate, maybe?
Yes, I think so. We're talking very early dial-up internet access days here, aren't we? So peer-to-peer stuff, which most people wouldn't know about. So the fact they even went there is interesting enough as it is, but it certainly isn't as neat and tidy as it could be. Yeah.
In Howard Gordon and Alex Ganzer, actually, obviously, they've gone on to become very, very famous writers with their shows of their own, like Homeland 24, things like that. But this was the beginning, really, of their careers, and they were fairly new, like a lot of the great writers who came off the X-Files, and they admitted that they weren't computer literate, and it took weeks to research and fact-find this episode, and I think they've since admitted that it's weak in places, and I think that fact of the fact that they didn't really understand the technology in a way, or the way it works, shows, really. But the thing is, I don't think it's too... I mean, for me, as somebody who's not massively computer literate, I'm a Mac guy, and anyone... Do you own a Mac?
I do, yeah.
You do. Now, you sound more computer literate than me, but you get a lot of people who don't own Macs say that Macs are for people who don't understand computers. Right? Now, I take issue with that.
Yeah, so do I.
But because I think that's rubbish. But I think the principle is that sometimes there are certain people who are aren't computer literate, and I think what they give you for this is just enough, I think, for people like me to go, okay, I don't really need to know anymore. I get the idea of what it's trying to do.
Yeah, I think considering that they admittedly have a lack of technical prowess at this stage of their career, they pull it off pretty well.
Yeah.
But we can look back with 20 years worth of hindsight and pick it apart brutally if we want to. There's issues there that it shouldn't play out quite the way it does, but for the sake of casual entertainment, just run with it. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. So then, obviously, we've got Scully and Mulder and Scully looking at the transcript of Wilczek's conversation. One thing struck me: how much she keeps replaying the same words on the tape. And the two words she plays are Eastern philosophies. It's like Eastern philosophies.
I couldn't quite understand when I first watched it why she was concentrating on that specific point, but it kind of gets explained a little bit because of the deviation in his voice as opposed to the recording that the COS has. But that again is a slightly messy scene.
It is. It just made me laugh a little bit though as well. I thought, did she really like those words? Eastern philosophies. But obviously now this is the point where Jerry comes in. Wilczek's going to be brought in, and Jerry wants to prove himself, and you just know at this point, that Jerry's going to die, and he's pretty certain. He's either going to be redeemed or he's going to die because he's a knob, and I'm quite happy for the latter, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think most people who are watching at this point are willing for a continuation of what happens to Scully at the beginning of the episode, where it threatens to do something but then doesn't. But because he's the only one there's no witnesses. They drop him from a great height and Jerry goes splat and no one really cares.
Yeah. Although I have to say, even though obviously it's a good way of killing Jerry because it shows the threat of the COS and quite what's going on in Eurisco, but I think the way Gerald Freeman directed that scene was poor. I suspect it's because he didn't have the budget and the means. But there's literally a scene where the lift is plummeting and it's just Wayne Duvall on the floor wriggling about.
Yeah, he should be like dangling off the ceiling, shouldn't he? But he's just like clinging to the floor and trying to look frightened as best he can. Probably more worried if his bald spot's showing or not. Yeah, I guess it does enough to suspend your disbelief for just a second. But
Yeah.
again, if we break it down, it's like this is a poor moment of this episode.
It doesn't really. It gets the point across, but I think it deserved a little bit more tension and terror, really, because it's a horror. The way he dies is horrible. A lift plummeting like 30 floors or whatever. I mean, that's nasty.
It's got to be one of the worst ways to go, right?
Yeah, horrible way to go, And you don't really get that feeling that he's, that terror, which is a shame, because it really would, if you'd have got that, you'd have really sold how scary the COS is. And it doesn't quite do that, which is a shame. But then, obviously, Jerry's dead, and it cuts to Mulder, and he's replaying things, and he's trying to find, things about the case and Wilczek. And Scully comes in, and there's this. She actually says to him, "You've been through a lot." And I went, "Well, has he? Has he? Has he been through a lot?" Again, it's the whole thing of, I don't buy the fact he'd care that much about Jerry. I just don't. I just don't think that relationship is there.
Do you think there's something more that might have been in the episode's original cut that might have alluded to the fact that Mulder's been through a bit more?
Maybe it's a reference to, cumulatively, not just this episode, but everything with his sister and and his life and his job and his family. But that's not the inference. The inference is that he's been through a lot because he's lost his friend. And it's like, well,
but he's not his friend.
No, not really. And he was pissed off at him for stealing his profile, quite rightly. It just doesn't fly. It doesn't land. They're trying to extract drama and put a personal stake for Mulder when there isn't much of one, really. If it had been like I don't know, if they'd have had a character brought in who's in a couple of episodes and he's somebody Mulder worked with and there's a genuine relationship there and they've built that up and then he dies like this, you'd feel it. But it just doesn't fly. Not for me, anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair summary of that particular aspect, yeah.
Obviously now, well, they go and find Wilczek, and this is where the government show up now. The government agents, and they're at Wilczek's house, and they're basically, blocking it off from Mulder. And I have to say, even though the government aspect does add a little bit of extra spice to the ending, and an extra bit of contextualisation to it all, and I think it needed to go in that direction, otherwise the plot would have petered out pretty quickly. Do the government really need to be in every single episode? Because up to this point, pretty much, bar maybe the Jersey Devil, and to an extent Squeeze, there has been a shady government aspect to every episode, even when it's not been about aliens. And I feel like, well, do we really need this again?
I've got an alternative conspiracy theory for this one.
Go on,
it's not the government, it's Microsoft.
Oh,
because it's just some dudes in suits who just say you can't come in here, and they don't give Mulder any accreditation. They say you've got to have code whatever access to get in, and he just turns around and leaves. So if it's that easy to deter an FBI agent, all you got to do is throw on a suit and say no. Then true. Shit's going to go down. So let's say Microsoft did it, and they built Windows 98 off the back of the COS.
Ooh, I like that theory. That's a great theory.
It's bullshit, but
I'm
just playing devil's advocate. I'm just saying how easily deterred Mulder is whenever he sees someone in a suit that's not FBI standard issue.
Yeah, he doesn't really question it. I think it possibly because he's become so indoctrinated to the fact that they are out there, the men in black, the men in grey, whatever, that he's just used to it now. And he's just like, oh, okay, you're another shady government type who I'm never going to...
The gentleman he speaks to is reasonably cordial. Doesn't act in a threatening manner. Doesn't say get in your car and turn around like they normally do. It's just like, if you haven't got to code whatever access it is, you can't come in.
He doesn't punch him in the rib like the guy in Deep Throat does.
Yeah.
And, just rough him up. That's true. That's a good point, actually. But, yeah, I think it's interesting that now you've got a chance to see Deep Throat again. This is the first time we've seen Deep Throat, actually, since the episode Deep Throat. Allows us Jerry Harding to come in for a couple of scenes and... give a little bit of exposition about Wilczek and a little bit of contextualisation, only a little scene, but Jerry Harding could be in the episode for 30 seconds and he steals it, really.
He adds enormous weight to this, doesn't he?
He does, and it adds that extra little. It's always cool when you get Deep Throat in the first season pop into episodes that aren't about aliens, because it it opens up the whole idea of who he's working for and the government to not just be about UFOs and aliens, but they're interested in all kinds of shit. And I like that.
Yeah, it's all about the bigger picture, and you could concentrate on Mulder's quest, his following Samantha and alien paraphernalia and whatnot, but there's so much more on the line, and it all links together in some vague fashion.
Yeah,
that it is interesting, and again, it adds some validity to the episode that Deep Throat has shown up at this point.
Definitely, and there's also a little hint from Mulder where he says. From Deep Throat, where he says to Mulder, you're testing the terms of our arrangement by calling me out, and they meet in broad daylight and everything. So there's that little, it's not really played again, but there's that little hint of, play by the rules, which I liked. And you get when Deep Throat, he's always reticent. It's like he never quite wants to be there. But then he, less so than Mr. X, because Mr. X just blatantly didn't want to be there. But there's always that thing with Deep Throat that he's really sort of, he knows that he's really in danger every time he meets Mulder, and you get that sense.
Yes, he does. He always looks like he's about to shit his pants.
Yeah.
And couldn't really care less about the outcome of this computer or whatnot.
No.
So.
This is it. So obviously this is where Mulder now goes to see Wilczek, and we get some interesting, ideas about how, they use the Oppenheimer thing as a parallel, Oppenheimer being the guy who created the atom bomb.
Yeah, I love this comparison, by the way. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a really good parallel, isn't it, of the idea that, Oppenheimer created something that...
He loved the work, Mr. Mulder!
Yeah. It's the idea of creating something that you intend for good that is then used for horrendous purposes. And it's, you can totally, I think, use that parallel for the COS and for AI.
Yeah, I would have just loved it if he'd quoted the Bhagavad Gita like Oppenheimer does, just to really ram it home. But yeah, I enjoy the comparison mightily. And again, it adds some weighting, particularly for audiences of a certain age at this point, because if you say we're looking at it from a point of view when as kids or teenagers, we wouldn't truly understand what that meant.
Yeah.
But people in their 40s and 50s would have done.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
It would have had greater understanding to the potential threat that the COS has by comparing it to the atom bomb. Yeah,
it's a really good comparison. And it's a decent scene, really, that, adds more, keeps adding more to the episode. And you get the... it's all building up, basically, to Mulder deciding that, he's got to be the one who basically takes this thing out because he knows it exists. He knows what it's capable of. He knows the government, or Microsoft, maybe, are after getting it. You never know. And he knows that he's got to... if he can't understand the tech, he's got to get rid of it before it falls into the hands of, the people who did what they did with Oppenheimer's research. So it's an interesting thing. I believe Mulder would do that.
Yeah, the same as someone probably would do if anyone outside the Manhattan Project had found out about it.
Yeah.
There would have been so much heat, for lack of a better word, on the people responsible to not use it. So the one person who has any kind of morality or responsibility has the opportunity to do something about it, and he does, as you would truly expect him to.
Absolutely, yeah. Obviously, at this point as well, he talks to Scully about it, and she's still, denying the idea, and there's the classic back and forth. And then he does another, I like to spot these in episodes as well. Mulder does a classic walk away from Scully without telling her where she's going, where he's going. He's like, where are you going? Just walked off. He's terribly rude quite often. He really is. Whether it's hanging up phones or just walking away without saying anything. It's outrageous.
Yeah, it's just Mulder's way of drawing the line between, can I get Scully on board for this, yes or no? Okay, if I want to see this through, I have to walk away now.
Yeah.
And there's so much of that in season 1.
I did also think as well that it's quite lucky that the COS scans Scully's computer in the middle of the night, because otherwise she would have been fast asleep for everything. Because Mulder's obviously going into Eurisco anyway, right, and doing this. She only turns up because the computer has scanned and she's tracked it to the thing, to the building. Otherwise, he'd have gone in. She wouldn't have been around.
Yeah, again, very convenient. And of course, it had to make the phone ring, which it doesn't do the first time it accesses the computer. So, like we're saying, there's a massive continuity sort of technical issue there. But it serves a purpose, so we'll forgive it.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. It just made me laugh. I think as well, then, obviously, obviously then it builds up to the climax where they go into Eurisco and Scully's going through the vent shafts and she's trying to basically get into the core mainframe and everything. What do you think about this scene? Because I thought it dragged a little bit. I think the intent's good. Do you? It's
a little long.
It is a bit long, isn't it?
But I like the tension, like the bit where she's suspended over the fan blade and she's trying to shoot the motor out to stop it.
That was good.
Always scary, that type of thing. I thought that was well executed. I didn't find the aspect where she's been literally blown down and around the shaft network particularly convincing.
No,
it looks a little bit too carefree and easy.
Yeah.
Not like she's going down a whitewater rapids or anything.
No.
She's moving pretty fast.
No, I know what you mean. It was just a little bit silly, that was. But I think as well, the episode struggles to get tension out of Mulder plugging a virus into a computer. That's always quite difficult. And a computer, I thought that, I don't know about you, but the socket reminded me of like a VGA in the back of a TV. And I know it's the era, and this is the scene that really shows up how dated the technology is. But I understand the meaning behind it, and I am nitpicking. But I just thought that's like the back of my telly. It just made me laugh.
Again, they didn't go for anything technically impressive with that malarkey, and truly dependent on the fact that most of the people watching wouldn't know much about this sort of thing in that day and age. The Silicon Valley people would be pulling their hair out, and everyone else wouldn't care.
The real life Brad Wilczeks would be going mental. Yeah,
yes,
true.
They would. They'd be getting mad at these neat and tidy minds.
Yeah, that's true. What do you think then about the Claude twist? Because obviously this is the point where Mulder's about to destroy the COS, and Claude pulls out, Jive Man pulls out a gun, and it turns out that he's a bad guy. What do you think about that?
If you couldn't see that coming in the first 5 minutes, how very dare you?
Yeah, I know.
Unfortunately, he is the least incognito backstabber of all time, unfortunately. And yes, I think what he eventually ends up becoming is much more prevalent to the character, his behaviour, how he looks in it, that he's going to be a dirty agent rather than the super of the building. Yeah. But that's one hell of an undercover mission he's been on if he's been trying to crack that for a couple of years.
It's true.
He must have had to actually do a computer course in that time.
Yeah.
To stay legit.
God, imagine if we'd have seen that in the episode, or like special features, Claude on his IT course. That would have been exciting.
He's there reading Windows 95 for dummies.
I did think as well that Scully got out of that vent pretty quick to get there. Because you last see her where she's basically shooting the thing off, but she's still in the middle of all the chaos. But she quickly gets down there and gets the gun on him.
And the COS hasn't done anything further to apprehend her at that point. It's like, okay, I give up.
Yeah,
you crack on.
That's true. And I think as well, I mean, there's a flicker of a moment where Claude's trying to explain everything, and get out of it, that she sort of hesitates, and I feel like saying, "Oh no, there's no way for 1 second that anything he says would make her not give that thing to Mulder."
It's a good scene, though. I liked it, but yeah, you were never in any doubt that Scully would be have her head turned when, like, you will be accountable.
Yeah,
like, he's turned off his jive voice now, and he's gone full government.
Yeah. It's true, but it is admittedly consistent with Scully right now, because she still doubts things, whereas Scully of, say, season 3 or 4 would have just gone, "Fuck you, mate," and just, wouldn't have even blinked and given it to Mulder. So it is consistent with the Scully of now. And I think that the overload then of the COS does work, and this is the moment it reminded me the most of Hal, just to go back to 2001, especially where it says, "Brad, why?"
Yeah, I found that a bit strange.
Yeah.
Of course he knows why, and it's not even Brad. So.
But I think it just hammers home the idea that it is more than a computer. That it has a sense of personality and pain as it's dying, effectively. Well, seemingly dying anyway. So I think that was the reason, to give it an element of personality.
Yeah, just be careful next time you try and format your computer, folks, because you might hurt its feelings.
It's true. Yeah, you don't want to piss it off. And then obviously after that, you've got Deep Throat popping back to say that Wilczek's been grabbed. And this happens a lot, actually. Memorably, the one that I always remember like this is Soft Light with Tony Shalhoub as the guy with the shadow the Deadly Shadow. I don't know if you remember that one in season 2. I love that episode. And he's grabbed, and there are people there grabbed by the government, and that's a much more effective episode with similar kind of ideas to this in a way. But I believe that Wilczek would be grabbed. Do you?
Yeah, if that person existed today, they might well get plucked off the street. You never know, considering what's on the line. It's definitely a threat to national security, so they're probably justified by doing it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be such a conspiracy thing at all.
Well, yeah, it would be different. The way that the government is now has changed. So that's a good point. It might not even be, a secret anymore.
Yeah, Patriot Act would fuck him up the arse, quite frankly.
It's true, it would. And it's interesting. I don't think you can quite tell whether Deep Throat is happy or not of the outcome. It's a bit ambiguous when he says the machine is dead. I like the way that was played, that there's an ambiguity as to whether he's happy or not.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. And he utters the line, Wilczek's virus was thorough. And then we see something to the contrary.
Yeah, which is the COS blinking back into life, which is the classic little tag thing at the end. Although beforehand, I did think, actually, when I watched this again, I wonder if Claude is talking to Deep Throat. Because he's reporting in about how it's, they're still not finding any evidence of it. And you don't know who's on the other end. And I did think to myself, I wonder if that was Deep Throat. Because obviously Deep Throat's involved in this. So there's no evidence to it. But in a way, I quite like the idea maybe it is. That, Deep Throat's caught between these two worlds. That he's got to try and get this tech. But then he's also helping Mulder to take it out as well. Who knows?
That's a very interesting look at it.
Who knows? Could be Bill Gates. You never know.
Could be.
But yeah, so the tag, obviously the COS is alive. We never see the COS again. Artificial intelligence does crop up again in the show a couple of times, but the COS is still out there. So, yes, it could be anywhere now.
Yeah, it's probably Google now.
Probably, yeah.
For all we know.
So yeah, that was our look at Ghost in the Machine, and we're going to move on now to ask the question, do you believe in? Which, this week, I'm going to ask you, Matt, do you believe in artificial intelligence?
Absolutely. I think it's there in some form or another, whether it's, at the stage the COS is where it can swip out its own microchips to electrocute people and give itself a voice synthesizer that it didn't have when Wilczek built it. But artificial intelligence is a thing. We know it is, and it's only going to get bigger and better and therefore more threatening to humanity potentially. So I don't think this one's really open to debate. It is what it is.
Do you think then that it's going to be a Skynet situation in the end? Like classic, obviously from Terminator, the idea of an AI taking over, considering humanity as less effective and then turning on us? Or do you think it would be much more of a benevolent kind of force that would end up enhancing humanity?
It could be both, I think. But ultimately, you only have to look at how human beings behave at a worldwide level in terms of how we've destroyed half of the planet, we've killed off species, we're at war constantly. That a machine, if it was looking at purely logically, with no nostalgia whatsoever, go, these guys are motherfuckers, I need to get rid of them. So when and what would and if it would ever get to that point, how long that would take, goodness knows. But artificial intelligence is real, so it's only logical to think that it'll end up going down that route at some point, which then poses the question, how far do we take technology?
Well, yeah, it's a fascinating idea, and it's, the X-Files just touches on it really here, by creating a slightly malevolent computer. But ultimately, the COS isn't necessarily an evil being. It acts in many respects to protect itself, and it's a recurring theme you find in a lot of fiction about artificial intelligence, in that it doesn't always act with evil intent. It quite often acts to protect itself. And that's an interesting idea in itself, that maybe AI could do something terrible or wipe us out, but it might not even be doing something with evil intent. Knowing the way our world works.
Yeah, well, a lot of bad things can happen out of self-defense.
Yeah, exactly.
Like America dropping the atom bomb, which again is touched upon in this episode, it's purely out of self-defense. Does that make America evil in the eyes of the Japanese? It probably did at the time, but now we would say it was a means to an end, and the very existence of the COS was threatened, so it acted accordingly. So it wasn't evil, but it's a very negative outcome for certain individuals, and it poses a threat to others, so it has to be eliminated.
But it also gets into the ideas of, if you go deeper down the rabbit hole of AI, what is intelligence? Is intelligence equal to soul? Is it equal to, consciousness? Is it equal to the idea of good and evil that people are debating whether or not that exists, or that, there's lots of things with it, whether a computer or an artificial machine could think in those terms.
Yes, that's a very good point. Have you ever seen the movie Ghost in the Shell?
I haven't, no. Is that the anime?
Yes, and I think if that's a subject matter that fascinates you, the whole term of soul in a machine, and can they think or comprehend in that manner, then Ghost in the Shell would be a good one for you to watch.
I'll look that up. I've heard much about it over the years.
I wrote a very interesting piece on it for failcritics.com, so you might want to have a look at that and then see if it's something that you'd be interested in exploring. But it is a wonderful film. It's only 90 minutes, so it's not like too over the top, and it's fairly easy to digest. But if you want to explore more of the negative side of artificial intelligence, then that would be a good one to watch.
Cool, I will do. I'll have a look. Another one recently, obviously, that touched upon this was Ex Machina last year, which was Alex Garland's interesting story about an AI. Did you see that?
No, I didn't get around to seeing it yet, although it was definitely on my list of films that I wanted to watch during the year, but it didn't make it over to the Isle of Man where I live. But I will watch it at some point because it's all about that AI subject, which I find quite fascinating, and I've only heard excellent things about it.
It is very good, and it does have Oscar Isaac plays a very Brad Wilczek kind of character, actually, in many respects. This slightly eccentric genius who creates, in this case, an AI that's a beautiful woman, effectively. And then there's lots of other questions about love and sex and emotion. It's a very, very good story. And it poses a hell of a lot of questions. So the artificial intelligence idea is fascinating. And like you said, it's only going to become more of a question the deeper down the technology rabbit hole we go. So we may well revisit this on the Xcast down the line, actually, with certain episodes. So, interesting and quite scary.
I'll definitely be tuning in for those episodes.
Oh, well, you may be on them. You never know. Okay, let's finish up this episode with the X quiz. And Matt, you have a opportunity now to try and beat your score, which was 3 last time you were on.
I highly suspect I will not do as well this time, because whilst I was watching this episode in preparation for the podcast, my cat decided to join me on my lap, so my note-taking ability was severely limited, but I will give it my best shot.
We'll blame the cat if it all goes wrong. That's fine. You've got a scapegoat. Excellent.
Excuses early.
Okay. So, are you ready? 5 questions and a quote.
Okay,
let's do this. Question 1. What does Scully claim Nancy Spiller was called at the Academy?
I do kind of remember that, but it's gone. I remember it being said, but it's gone.
Okay, it was the Iron Maiden.
That's it. God damn it!
Which doesn't really track when you meet her. She doesn't really seem that much of an Iron Maiden, but there you go. Question 2. What does Wilczek say Eurisco means?
I discover things.
Excellent. Ancient Greek, I discover things. So, yeah, well done. Off the grid. Excellent. Question 3. When Deep Throat is talking to Mulder about the Wilczek and his past, where does he say the first thinking machine chess computer played its match?
I think it was Finland.
Well done.
Helsinki, Finland, to be precise.
Helsinki, absolutely. Well done. Question 4. What floor do Mulder and Scully reach when they've climbed the Eurisco building and are absolutely knackered?
45th?
Not a bad guess, but no. It's floor 29, level 29. So, slightly difficult one.
Was a bad guess then.
Well, I was trying to be diplomatic. I can understand, though, because it's a bloody big building, so I can get why you got there. When Scully is in bed, before the COS wakes her up, what is the name of the book she's been reading?
No, I never noticed that.
Okay, I suppose it's a bit of an obscure one. It's called The Obstacle Course, and it's written, oddly enough, by Gerald Freeman, the director.
Oh,
so
nice.
he basically got to shill his own book. Yeah, there you go. Okay, and finally, and this is where you can equal your score, at least you're not going to be able to beat it now, but you can equal it if you get this quote. So, are you ready?
Okay.
Okay. Loss of freedom does funny things to a man. So, who said it and where?
It was Deep Throat when he's talking to Mulder on the bench.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent, yeah. Obviously talking about Wilczek and the potential of him breaking and actually doing what the government want, which is an interesting idea, really. So, you've equaled your score. You've scored 3 out of 6.
Oh, I must say I'm quite positively relieved. These quizzes don't get easier, Tony.
No, I know. I'm terrible at this. I keep saying I'm going to make the questions easier for people, and I just don't.
It's almost akin to an FBI agent's test.
Yeah, it's like a Quantico. Yeah.
If you get 6 out of 6, you are Mulder.
Yeah, you are Mulder. Yeah, that's true. I ought to put some ratings up about what you get, depending on what score you get, actually. That's true. What character you are.
Yeah, if you get 0 or 1, you're Jerry.
Yeah, you're Jerry LaManna. Good one, yeah. I might do that for fun. But yeah, so 3 out of 6, not bad. You can hopefully beat it next time.
Yeah, I'll make far more notes next time. Every little detail I shall write down.
The whole script, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, so that brings us to the end of this latest Xcast, and leaves me to thank once again Matt for coming on and sharing his thoughts.
Thanks very much, Tony. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, excellent. Same here, definitely. So, where can we find you online?
Okay, you can find me occasionally spouting my musings on good movies or some bad movies at failcritics.com for their podcast that's also on iTunes. If you're into retro video games, check us out at retroasylum.com, again also on iTunes. And if you play FIFA Ultimate Team by any chance, you can find us at foothead.com or the Foothead podcast on iTunes and YouTube.
Excellent. All interesting podcasts to check out. I'm definitely going to check some of them because I haven't checked out Retro Asylum as well. I really want to check that out. So definitely, yeah, give them a look. That's awesome. You can obviously find the Xcast as usual at the X_cast on Twitter, at the Xcast on Facebook, and the XFcast at gmail.com. Please do give us some feedback on what you think about the show. We'd love to hear from you, and we're also on iTunes. Please do subscribe, leave us a review, that would be awesome. And we're also on Acast, so look those guys up because they're our hosts. And we'll be back soon for another Season 1 episode, and it's a good one next week. It's Ice we're talking about, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a great episode, so that's going to be a lot of fun to get into. But again, thanks, Matt. Hope to have you back on the Xcast later on in the year.
Anytime, be my pleasure.
Wonderful. So, remember, guys, take care, but most importantly, trust no one.
File deleted.